Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. Guys, today, back on working on the connecting rod project on the steam locomotive at the Georgia Museum of Agriculture. Previously, we'd gotten the new bearings all put together, finished machined out, reassembled, and back on the locomotive on the left side. Now, I went ahead and pulled the right connecting rod off. We got to do the exact same thing to this one, and I'm not going to go into as much detail, but I did want to just kind of have a little summary video on what all we have to do on this one. I can already tell you this is a little bit different, nothing major, but we got some differences between the two that we're going to have to deal with, and we'll get in there and work on that as we go. So without further ado, let's see if we can get this connecting rod rebuilt and reinstalled back on the locomotive and have it back up and going here so that they can get back into operations coming up very soon. So the interesting thing to me on this is that when we did the left side, we were looking at the tapered bolts that we had to make to go in here, and on the back side on the left, those bolts are supposed to have a taper in there of 1/8 inch per foot. And we actually had a taper reamer custom ground by Meyer Tool Works down in Florida to that taper because it's not a standard taper. And but when we got in here on the one side, on the large side, the back side, it was not at this taper. It was at a 1/4 inch per foot taper, which is a standard taper for like a tapered pin. The one on the small end, on the front, it was at the 1/8 inch per foot taper like we were expecting. Now on this side, this is the 1/8 inch per foot tapered reamer. When I drop it down in here, we're going in the wrong way. Let me flip this over. So on this one, when I drop that taper reamer in there, it's a fit. So this one is still at the original 1/8 inch per foot taper like it's supposed to be. Again, mystery, don't know why, don't know the history. Again, I suspect, and I mentioned this before, that someone had re-reamed those pins on the other side for whatever reason, and they didn't have the standard size tapered reamer like I ran into, and instead of having one custom ground, they just reamed it out oversized to a 1/4 inch per foot taper. Not a big deal. It's just not original. We ended up leaving it at a 1/4 inch per foot on that one on the other side. It was not going to be practical. We were going to have to actually go up to even a larger size reamer than what I had to be able to ream it out because it was already enlarged on the other side. So we just kept that 1/4 inch per foot reamer, our taper, on the other side. I am kind of happy though that this is original on this side. I would rather keep it as original as possible. I've got all the bolts. They're all going to be custom fit to each hole. I got them all numbered so that they'll be reused and go back into the same holes later on. So it's not a big deal as long as it goes back together like it should be. And like I said, it is numbered, and it should be pretty evident to the next person that works on it if it's not me about how to go back together. But good news here though is that we're going to be able to use the correct taper on these. So let's get in here, and I think the first thing we'll do is start working on the bearings, getting them bored out to the right size. So once again, we got our new bronze bearings here. These are the old original bearings. I assume these are original to the locomotive, over 100 years old. They're getting worn and thin. These were made to the blueprints. We actually have the blueprints, the original blueprints on these. So these are pretty much back to the original size, shape, and everything else. And we're going to be machining these out, finish machining these out. Now these bearings, these bronze bearings, I actually did some videos on these back about 9 months ago. We actually had patterns made. We had these cast in bearing bronze. Windy Hill Foundry did the casting for us, and then I had already machined them, everything except boring them to size, and we needed to take them off and actually measure the pins that these go on so that we can make them fit. The pins that these ride on the wheels are, as you can imagine, worn as well. This locomotive's over 100 years old. It's interesting to me though that the front and the back, both the pins are worn down about 100 thousandths smaller in size than what they were originally. Not a big deal. that's a lot of wear, but still there's plenty of metal in there. They're nearly perfectly round. I mic'd them all the way around. But what's interesting to me is that all 4 pins wore almost exactly the same. You would expect that in some ways, but at the same time, it's kind of surprising that they all pretty much came out almost the exact same numbers on both sides. We could just about swap these bearings from one side to the other because their wear was so similar on both sides of the locomotive, which is actually a good thing. That tells me that things are on the locomotive are in pretty good shape and arrangement so that one side's not wearing more than the other. So I've got my measurements, and we're going to again bore these out. I'm going to set this up over on the mill machine. Again, not going to go into great detail on it, but almost the exact same measurements as the pins on the other side. Let's get these bored out. So we're boring over here. This should actually be the final size for this particular one here. So just like before, we set it up with a boring head over on the milling machine, and just taking a little bit at a time until we get it to where we want it. So I slowed down my feed rate on this. This is the last pass, so get a little bit smoother finish hopefully. And once I get this one done, I got to come back and do the other one, get it bored to size, and then we'll be ready to move on. Got everything bored out here, nice like it needs to be. Everything's to size, just a little bit oversized, about 0.10 larger than the what we mic'd on the pins. So those should go together nicely. I think next up it's going to be to cut these in half, and do that. We'll go over to our bandsaw out in the other shop and get that done. Over at my Marvel bandsaw, I did go ahead and drill an oil hole through the top there. I didn't show that, but it is done. We're just going to let that saw cut right through that. Split these bearings in half. All right, I've been getting the bearings test fit in here and getting everything sized up. I got them stamped so they go in the correct place on both the front and the back. And there's the front bearing, all ready to go. Up next, I think we're ready to start looking at reaming out the pins and getting those ready to go. I already made a set of pins for the smaller end down here because I already have my machine set up. So I need to go ahead and get these reamed out and ready to go. The other side, because I wasn't sure what the taper was going to be, I did not make those pins yet, so I have to make those, and we'll get those made at this 1/8 inch per foot taper. So let me go ahead and we'll start working on getting these fit. All right, so I got the original pins in here now. They're both pretty loose. This is why I was wanting to redo all these. These should be tight, and you can see, I mean, they tighten up, but there's potential for a little bit of play in this, even with them in there. So that's the reason I want to freshen these up. These are tapered at 1/8 inch per foot. Again, not a standard size taper. I had to have a custom reamer, this reamer right here, made just for this job, and I got that done. Kurt Meyer at Meyer's Tool and Service down in Lake City, Florida, basically just took a number 11 tapered pin reamer, which is 1/4 inch per foot taper, and he reground this on his CNC grinder to get the correct taper in there. And now what I want to do is come in here and just ream this out, and I'm going to have to freshen that hole completely up, get good, nice material down in there. And again, we got a new bolt that I've already made that, see, it's not quite going all the way down right now, but once we get it freshened up, it should seat in there, and we should have good positive contact all the way around. There shouldn't be any looseness in there at all, which is what we want on these bolts. So let me get the ream in here, get these cut out like they need to be, and I get the first pin installed, and then we'll ream out the second. We'll see everything stays in alignment. All right, we did a little reaming here, and look at there. That's going to work in just fine. Tap that home, that'll lock it in place. And that first bolt is done. So now rinse and repeat. We'll pull the second bolt out. I'm going to leave this one pinned in. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it all up just so that it's nice and everything's in its final setting place or whatever. And then we'll ream this one out and get that one set in there as well. So this is the other side with the larger size bearing in it, and I've already got it bolted in and have started the process of reaming it. And this one again will be 1/8 inch per foot taper. And I've already got the hole pretty well down to size. Got just a little bit farther to go, and then I need to get my bolts made so that we can start fine-tuning these. I think I'm going to stop right there. I've got, maybe 1/4 of an inch before I'm all the way at the bottom, but that'll give me a little bit of room in case I need to ream it out a little bit more to make my bolt fit once we get done. So anyway, we got a little bit of wiggle room that we can come back in here after I get that bolt made. Let me get this reamer out of here, and we will work on getting a bolt made. And working on these tapered bolts, getting ready to start single point threading these to 5/8 11. Just check that thread pitch out here before we get started. Make sure we're on 11, and it looks like we are. So we'll go ahead and knock this one out. Yeah, that's going up on there just fine. All right. This one is roughed out. I still need to do my taper, but I'm going to do that in a separate operation. I'm going to go ahead and get the other one roughed out, and then we'll set up for the tapers and do those after a while. Because I think we got this side built back up and ready to go back on the locomotive. I didn't really show a whole lot of details on this, but we did get the tapered pins here finished up. We got them all fitted together. I've gone in here and adjusted some shims and stuff in here. Not a whole lot of shims in here, but we had to do a few little small shims to get everything spaced just right. just like before, I used my trammel points to tram this thing out. So if you didn't see that before, we got trammel points on those. These are 5 feet apart. That's what I want the center of each bearing to be. And I've got these little plastic plugs that I turned that are the same diameter as the pins on the locomotive wheel with a center in them. And we come in here and put this in here, and we got a nice perfect fit. So we are spaced exactly 5 feet apart. It's set up with the shims like it needs to be, ready to go out there. Let me show you the tram here just so you can kind of see it up close. So again, these are spaced 5 feet apart. I got one end in the center on the other side, and it matches up very nicely there. So we're spaced properly here and ready to go. And just to give you an idea of how much the old bearings have worn, these were the shims that we had in all the 4 bearings. So this is all 4 bearings in one pile. But you can see this is basically how much material was lost multiplied times those 4 bearings. So we got about 2.5 inches height here of shims that we took out that we're no longer using. That's 2.5 inches of extra brass that's in these new bearings that are basically replacing the ones that were old and not completely wore out, but not far from it either. So with that, guys, I'm going to take this back out to the museum. We're going to get it installed back on the locomotive. And with this one done, we have both sides, new brasses on this one. There's still the other connecting rod, the one that goes from the steam engine to the rear wheel. I need to make brasses for those. This different patterns and different than any of these. I've still got to make patterns to get those done, but we'll have at least these done one little bite at a time on getting all these brasses redone on the locomotive. So I'll try to get you a shot of everything installed back on the locomotive before we finish this video up. But we're ready to go put this back together. Well, here we are again out here at the Georgia Museum of Agriculture. We got the Vulcan locomotive, and we've got our connecting rod installed over on the right side of the locomotive. This is the back rod there, and it goes back here to the back, and everything looks good. Now, I will tell you, we ran into one little issue on this connecting rod, in that when we went to put it all together down here, the connecting rod wouldn't slide in with the shim that we had in there, which was according to the blueprints. It wouldn't quite go together. It was just a little, it was like a 1/16 of an inch too tight. And I got my trammel rods out, and I actually checked the trim between the 2 wheels. So the center of the wheel there and the center of the wheel up front. And sure enough, the wheels were about a 1/16 of an inch out of trim. The other side was right on, but evidently over the years, with the changing out shims and stuff in these, you saw all the shims that we took out of those. This connecting rod on this side was just like a 1/16 of an inch shorter, so we had to kind of stretch it out a little bit. And what we did was I took this little wedge right here. I made a wedge that was the same diameter of the wheel, and we chalked the back wheel back here, and took a chain, put on the front of the locomotive, and hooked a tractor up to it, and we just kind of stretched it apart just enough, and I was able to slide that shim down in there. And then whenever we did, we took the pressure off, and it just closed right back up, and we got that space back together. Now we'll have to get out here and actually run the locomotive. You know, it should kind of everything find its seat. It wasn't like it was way out of trim, but it was out of trim just enough that had a little bit of difficulty getting that connecting rod back in there. The good news is, though, is that with it back in trim, getting those wheels trimmed back together, that should have the spacing set properly. I don't know if that will cause any, cause any kinds of issues with running the locomotive. I mean, it really shouldn't. It was so close, but it should be better now that we kind of got it back where it needs to be. And the way these bearings are in these wheels, I mean, you've easily got a 1/16 inch of play in there anyway, just for wiggle room, going around curves and having a little bit of movement and things. So we should be fine to go. But anyway, this job is finished, and like I think I had mentioned before, next week, from when I'm shooting this, next week we've actually got to get the locomotive fired up. The state inspector's coming out to do the annual inspection. We have to do that under steam. He's already came out and done the boiler inspection. We had to drain the boiler and all that. He's done that already. Now he has to come back and look at it under steam. And while we have it fired up for the final inspection, we will just do some fine adjusting to these bearings, make sure everything's adjusted like they need to be. I think we'll have it done. And with that, that is going to be a wrap on this locomotive connecting rod project that we've been working on this month. Appreciate you guys coming along for the ride on that and seeing what all's involved. It was a fairly detailed project. I mean, it wasn't terrible or anything, just a lot of back and forth and working in my shop, coming out here. There's a couple of times it didn't make it on camera, but I had to make some adjustments or whatever and take things back to my shop and go back and forth, but we got it all worked out, and everything is all wrapped up here. So, and with that, like I said, we're wrapped up with this project. I got some other projects that I really want to get done on the locomotive that we're going to try to work in. Now that I'm retired and have more time to work in the shop, we can probably do some of these smaller projects that aren't going to take as long, and be able to kind of schedule it during the week. Normally they just run the locomotives on Saturday, unless they have special events during the week. So we'll have to figure out some weeks that they don't have any runs during the week, and maybe there's a couple of pins and bushings and stuff that need to be worked on it. Nothing terrible, nothing really in depth, but work that needs to be done. So we're going to try to get some of that knocked out here pretty soon as well. With that is going to be a wrap on this episode. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Those thumbs up and comments are always greatly appreciated. Hit that bell icon up there to get notifications when new videos are posted to the site. And as always, a big, huge thank you to those who support the site financially through Patreon, PayPal, etc. It does really enable me to take the time to shoot these videos, bring them to you, do all the editing and everything else that goes along with it, above and beyond the time that you spend working in the shop on things. So anyway, if you're interested in helping out with that, there's information down in the description of the video where you can click on and do that. With that, we will sign off, guys. We will catch you on the next video again. Thanks for watching.